The first words I heard upon returning to my own place after 3 agonizing weeks away were not "welcome back," or "we missed you." They were screamed from the living room by my daughter-in-law, her voice dripping with a venom I had never heard directed at me. "What is that witch doing here? Get out of my house right now." Her words struck me with the force of a physical blow, colder and sharper than any nor'easter wind. She was pointing a long manicured finger at me, the owner of the property, standing inside the house I had purchased with my own sweat, with hands cracked and callous from scrubbing other people's floors. For a moment the world tilted. I simply let the heavy strap of my purse slide from my shoulder. I walked forward, my footsteps firm on the hardwood I had polished myself, and looked her directly in the eyes. "This house is mine," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "It is not your frat house." I gestured to the door I had just entered. My son Ethan didn't even flinch. He just stood there staring at the floor, a monument to cowardice. And in that instant a cold, hard certainty settled in my chest. I knew that whatever happened next, neither of them would ever forget it. But to understand the ice in my veins, you have to understand the fire that forged me. My name is Martha Ellington, and I am 74 years old. For my entire life I worked. I cleaned houses in the burbs for people who didn't know my last name. I raised kids who weren't mine, ironing clothes for families who saw me as little more than furniture. I never complained. I never begged. I never held out my hand expecting a handout. Every single dollar I earned, I saved with a discipline bordering on fanaticism. Every cent I put away was a brick in the foundation of the one thing I craved. A roof of my own, a place where no one could ever tell me what to do or how to live. And I did it. I bought this house 22 years ago, on a quiet street in Middletown, Ohio, when my knees didn't ache with every step and I still had the strength to work double shifts. It's small, 2 bedrooms, a modest living room, a kitchen that always smells of strong coffee, and a small yard where I grow my petunias. But it is mine, entirely mine. I've lived alone since my husband passed nearly 2 decades ago. Ethan, my only son, married and moved out. I never asked him to stay, that is the way of the world. Kids are meant to fly. But I always assumed, I believed he would at least respect me. That he would remember the sacrifices, the nights I spent hunched over a sewing machine stitching clothes to sell just to pay for his school books. The times I ate ramen for dinner so he could have the meat. The silent, invisible sacrifices a mother makes, expecting no medals, no applause. My life was peaceful, my routine was simple, but it was dignified. I'd rise before the sun, brew my coffee, water my plants, sweep the patio. Sometimes my friend, Nancy Miller, a good woman who lives 3 houses down, would visit. We'd sit in the kitchen drinking iced tea, talking about everything and nothing. She's one of those rare souls who just listens, who doesn't judge. Nancy is my age, widowed like me, but luckier in her children. Hers visit weekly. They take her to Kroger. They call just to check in. I never envied her. I only felt a dull ache, a quiet sadness, when I realized how little Ethan seemed to think of me. Call once a month, perhaps. And even then he'd ask, "You good, Mom?" with a hurried tone that didn't actually wait for an answer. Everything fractured when my sister, Doris, called from 2 states over, Florida. She was sick, desperately sick, the kind that steals your ability to even lift a glass of water. Her children live across the ocean. They couldn't come, so she called me. And of course I went, because that is what family does. You drop everything. You go. I told Ethan I'd be gone for at least 2 weeks, maybe 3. "Don't worry about a thing, Mom," he'd said. "The house will be fine." I trusted him. I locked everything, watered the plants twice, said goodbye to Nancy, and took the long bus ride down to Doris's city. Those 3 weeks were a blur of antiseptic smells, sleepless nights, and quiet suffering. My sister was in agonizing pain. I cooked for her, bathed her, held her hand through the long dark hours. It was my duty. But deep inside I missed my home. I missed my own bed. I missed the familiar scent of my kitchen, the quiet sanctuary of my patio. I counted the days. When Doris was finally stable and her home nurse settled, I left. I took the bus back with a light heart, dreaming of that first cup of coffee in my own armchair. I never in 1,000 lifetimes could have imagined what was waiting for me when I stepped off the bus and turned onto my street. Something felt totes wrong. A prickle of unease. There was a car parked in my driveway, a flashy Chevy I didn't recognize. I thought perhaps a neighbor was visiting. But as I got closer, I saw it was parked right up to my garage. My heart began to beat a strange, heavy rhythm. Something was not right. I pulled out my keys, my hand trembling slightly. I opened the door. The first thing that hit me was the smell. It wasn't my house. My house smelled of coffee and lemon polish and old books. This was a cloying sweet perfume, thick and invasive. The lights were on in the middle of the day. There were shoes by the entrance, women's high heels, bright and garish, tossed carelessly on my welcome mat. I stood there, frozen, my travel bag still on my shoulder, trying to make the scene compute. I walked slowly toward the living room, and there he was. Ethan, my son, sitting in my armchair, watching cable TV as if it were any other Tuesday. He turned when he heard my step, and his expression, it wasn't surprise, it wasn't joy. It was discomfort. Guilt. "Mom," he said, his voice weak. I wasn't expecting you today." "What do you mean you weren't expecting me?" I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. "I told you I was coming back this week. What is going on here, Ethan?" He didn't answer. He just stood up, scratching the back of his neck, a nervous gesture he's had since he was a boy. And then I heard it. A woman's voice drifting from my bedroom. My bedroom. The most sacred place in my house, the one space that was mine and mine alone. "Julian, who is it? Did that old woman finally leave?" The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I didn't wait. I walked, my legs feeling like stone, to my room and pushed the door open without knocking. And there she was. Stephanie Woods, my son's wife, sitting on my bed. Her clothes were thrown over my clean sheets. Her creams and perfumes were scattered across my antique dresser. Her shoes were kicked under my window. She looked up at me, not with shame but with annoyance, as if I were the intruder. "What is that witch doing here? Get out of my house right now." Those were her words, screamed at me while she sat on my bed, legs crossed, painting her toenails a violent shade of red that was staining my white sheets. My sheets, the ones I had washed and hung in the sun before I left. I couldn't move. I just stood in the doorway of my own room, staring at this woman. What hurt most wasn't her venom. It was Ethan standing behind me, silent, not defending me, not silencing her, just staring at the carpet like a disobedient child. "Ethan," I said, my voice barely a whisper, though I never took my eyes off her. "Are you going to explain what this means?" He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Mom, it's just we needed a place. Just for a few days. We had problems with the landlord, he kicked us out. I thought since you weren't here, we could just stay until we found something." "Until you found something?" I repeated the words, tasting like ash. The anger was rising now, hot and sharp, from my stomach to my throat. "And it never occurred to you to call me? To ask me?" "We just didn't want to bother you," he mumbled. "We knew you were busy with Aunt Doris." Stephanie let out a sharp, contemptuous laugh. "Oh, please don't give her explanations, Ethan. This house is empty most of the time. What difference does it make if we use it?" Something inside me didn't just break. It shattered. It was a silent, catastrophic implosion in the center of my chest. I walked slowly to my dresser. I saw her things, her expensive half-used creams, her imported perfumes, their caps left off, staining the wood I had so carefully preserved for 40 years. I opened my closet. Her flimsy dresses and garish blouses were crammed in next to my simple clothes. Her shoes were piled on the floor. Everything was mixed, violated, as if she had a right. I turned and stared at her. She had gone back to painting her nails, utterly unbothered. "This house is mine," I said, my voice firm now, devoid of its earlier tremble. "I bought it with my labor, with my sweat, with years of sacrifice. And you have no right to be here without my permission." She looked up, a mocking smile playing on her lips. "Oh yeah? And what are you going to do, Martha? Kick me out? Please. I am your son's wife. We are family. You should be happy to help us." I didn't move. I just looked at her, feeling every word lodge itself in my heart like a shard of glass. But I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I would not scream. I would not beg. I knew in that instant that if I lost control, she would win. I took a deep, shuddering breath and turned to Ethan. "I want you to take your things out of my bedroom right now." "Mom, please," he whined. "Just let us stay a few more days. I promise." I am not interested in your promises. I cut him off. I want you out of my room. This is my house. If you are going to stay, it will be under my rules. But my room is mine. No one sleeps here but me. Stephanie jumped off the bed. A sharp, aggressive movement. Your rules? Who in the hell do you think you are? We are here because Ethan is your son. You have an obligation to help us. I have no obligation to you, I replied, meeting her gaze. And if you think I will allow you to disrespect me in my own home, you are profoundly mistaken. She took a step toward me, arms crossed, that look of sneering superiority that made my stomach churn. Ethan did nothing. He stood there, a useless hollow shadow. And in that moment I understood something I had refused to accept for years. My son was not the man I thought I had raised. He was a coward. A man with no spine who was allowing his wife to crucify me in my own sanctuary. Fine, I said finally. Stay. But you will take your things out of my bedroom now, or I will take them out myself. Stephanie laughed in my face. You won't do anything because if you do, Ethan is going to have to choose. And believe me, old woman, he is not going to choose you. Her words hit their mark, because I knew with a sickening certainty that she was right. I left the room. I walked to the kitchen, my legs shaking, and sat at the table just breathing. I heard their voices. Stephanie was screaming at Ethan, calling me a bitter old crone, demanding he put me in my place. And he just murmured. I got up and walked through my house, my sanctuary. I opened the kitchen cabinets. My good plates, the ones my husband had given me, were mixed with cheap, greasy plastic plates she had brought in. The refrigerator? My food was gone, replaced by half-empty takeout containers and expensive sodas I never drank. Everything was a mess, a violation. I went to the bathroom. Her expensive shampoos and body washes littered the small space. My simple towels were thrown in a damp pile on the floor, while hers, fluffy and new, were hanging on the rack. A cold, methodical fury began to crystallize inside me. It wasn't explosive. It was something far more dangerous. It was a deep, silent indignation that made me clench my fists until my nails bit into my palms. But I would not scream. She wanted me weak. She wanted me broken. I would be neither. I went back to the living room. Ethan came out of the room, his face etched with a fatigue that inspired no pity in me. Mom, I don't want to hear it, I said, my voice flat. I just want to know one thing. How long were you planning to stay here without telling me? He looked down. I don't know. Couple of weeks. Until we got money. And then what? Just disappear? Let me come back to this violation. It's not like that, Mom. I was going to tell you. Your promises mean nothing, Ethan. If they meant anything, you wouldn't have allowed that woman to speak to me that way. You wouldn't have let her desecrate my home. He just sat there, hands clasped between his knees, staring at the floor. And I watched him, the maternal love I had held for 40 years curdling into something dark and unrecognizable. Disappointment. Fine, I said, standing up. You will stay. But this is my house, and in my house my rules are respected. Understood? He nodded, still not meeting my eyes. That first night I didn't sleep in my room. They had moved their things to the guest room, but my bedroom felt tainted. I slept on the sofa, every creak of the house keeping me on edge. I could hear them whispering, Stephanie's voice sharp and angry even through the wall. I rose before dawn, as I always do. I went to the kitchen to make my coffee. But when I opened the cabinet for my favorite mug, it wasn't there. I found it in the sink, unwashed, a greasy bright red lipstick smear on the rim. She had used it. It wasn't just a mug. It was the last gift my husband gave me before he died. Something hot and final snapped in my chest. I washed it, my hands scrubbing until the porcelain was raw. I made my coffee and went to the patio. My plants. They hadn't been watered in 3 weeks. The leaves were brown, brittle, dead. They hadn't even bothered to give them a drop of water. As I stood there trying to salvage what I could, Stephanie came into the kitchen. She was in a silk robe, yawning as if she owned the world. She didn't greet me. She opened my refrigerator, took out the milk I had just bought, and drank directly from the carton. She stood there watching me through the window. Do you always get up this early? She asked, her voice thick with annoyance. It's noisy. You woke me up. I didn't answer. I just kept watering my dying plants. And this house is freezing, she continued, yelling back toward the bedroom. Ethan, you need to fix the heater. It's unbearable in here. Ethan emerged, bleary-eyed. He glanced at me, then quickly looked away. He made himself coffee and sat at the table. I came inside and sat across from him. Stephanie leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching us, waiting for the show. Ethan, I said calmly, we need to talk. How much money do you have saved to find another place? He stirred his coffee. Not much. We're a little tight. How much? $200 maybe. Stephanie scoffed. And what are we supposed to do with that? That's not even a deposit. Rents are insane, Martha, you know that. I wasn't asking you, I said, my voice like chipped ice. I am speaking to my son. Oh right. Your perfect little boy, she sneered. Well, let me tell you something. Your perfect son doesn't have a job. Hasn't for 2 months. If it wasn't for me, he'd be on the street. My blood ran cold. I looked at Ethan. Is that true? You're not working? He shrugged, a pathetic, childish gesture. I lost the last one. I'm looking. It's just not easy. That's why we need to be here. Stephanie interjected. We have nowhere else to go. And you live in this big house all by yourself. What is the problem? The problem, I said, standing up, is that you entered my home without permission. The problem is that you treat me like an intruder. The problem is that you have not 1 ounce of respect for me or for what is mine. She held my gaze, a cold smile on her face. Oh, don't play the victim. You should be grateful your son even remembers you. As bitter as you are, I wouldn't visit if you paid me. It was a direct hit. I looked at Ethan, pleading with my eyes for him to say something, to defend me, to be the man I raised. He just stared into his coffee cup. And I knew he had chosen. And he hadn't chosen me. I turned and walked to my room. I locked the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, the sheets still smelling faintly of her perfume. I would not cry. I would not give her that power. I picked up my phone and called Nancy. Nancy, I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts. I'm back. Can you come over, please? I need you. She was there in 20 minutes. When she walked in, Stephanie was on my sofa, feet on the coffee table, watching television. She looked Nancy up and down with open disdain. Who's this? This is my friend, I said coldly. And she has more right to be in this house than you do. Stephanie laughed. Oh, bringing in reinforcements. How pathetic. I ignored her. Let's go to the patio, Nancy. We sat outside. I told her everything. The return, the words, the room, the mug. Nancy, who had known me for 30 years, just listened, her expression hardening from confusion to pure indignation. Martha, she said, taking my hand, this is not right. You cannot let them do this. You have to put a stop to it. I know, I whispered. But he's my son. I don't want to lose him. Nancy looked at me with eyes full of a wisdom that only comes from shared grief. Honey, she said gently, you've already lost him. The Ethan you raised wouldn't let anyone speak to his mother that way. That man in there? He's not your son anymore. He's her husband. Her words were brutal, and they were true. I am not going to beg them to leave, I said, a new resolve hardening inside me. I will not fight or scream. But I will not be disrespected. Then what are you going to do? I looked at my dead plants, then at the house I had bled for. I'm going to make life impossible for them, I said, my voice low. Not with yelling. With actions. I am going to show them that this house has an owner, and that owner is me. That afternoon I went to Home Depot. I bought 5 heavy-duty padlocks. When I returned, Stephanie was gone. Out with friends, Ethan mumbled. I went to my room and pulled out the box containing my house deeds, the paid-in-full mortgage receipt, every document proving this property was mine. Then I went online. I researched tenants' rights, or in their case the lack thereof. They were not tenants. They were unauthorized occupants. I went to a print shop. I typed up a formal legal eviction notice. No emotion, no insults, just facts. It stated that Ethan Vance and Stephanie Woods were trespassing and had 3 days to vacate the property. I printed 2 copies. I came home and placed them on the living room table where they couldn't be missed. That night Ethan found them. I heard him gasp, then the frantic whispering from the guest room. He knocked on my door. Mom, can I come in? No, I replied from inside. Is this serious? You're kicking us out? You have 3 days, Mom. Please, we have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before you allowed your wife to treat me like filth in my own home, I said. I heard his footsteps retreat. Then the screaming started. Stephanie. She was accusing me of elder abuse, threatening to sue me. I sat on my bed calm and listened to the storm break. The next morning I was up before them. I went to the kitchen. I took everything that was mine, my coffee, my food, my canned goods, and locked them in the pantry. I put a padlock on the pantry door. I took my good pots and pans and locked them in the hall closet. I put a padlock on that door. Then I went to the refrigerator. I took out my things and I put a heavy padlock on the refrigerator door. Ethan came out first. He stopped dead in the kitchen doorway, his eyes wide. Mom, what did you do? I protected what is mine, I said calmly, sipping my coffee. If you intend to stay, you will use your own things, not mine. But how are we supposed to eat? To cook? That is your problem, Ethan, not mine. Stephanie burst out of the room, her hair wild. When she saw the padlocks, her face contorted with a rage that was almost animalistic. Are you insane? She shrieked, pointing at the fridge. How are we supposed to live? It's not my problem, I repeated. You can buy a mini fridge or you can eat out. But my things are mine. She lunged toward me, her fists clenched. You can't do this. It's inhumane. Ethan, say something to this maniac. Ethan just looked at the floor. You're useless. She screamed at him. Utterly useless. I walked past them and went to the bathroom. I locked myself in. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a 74-year-old woman, tired and lined, but whose eyes were clear and steady. I would not break. I called Mr. Harrison, a lawyer Nancy had recommended. I got an appointment for that afternoon. I dressed in my best clothes, the simple navy suit I kept for funerals and special occasions. I did my hair. I put on the pearl earrings my husband had given me. I wanted to feel dignified. I walked out of my room. I'm going out, I announced. I have an appointment. Mr. Harrison was a kind, no-nonsense man. I explained everything. He listened, taking notes. Mrs. Ellington, he said. This is a clear case of unauthorized occupancy, aggravated by verbal abuse. The notice you gave them is a good start, but we can get an emergency eviction order. A judge will sign it based on your testimony and your friends. It will be delivered by a court officer. They will have 48 hours. If they refuse, the sheriff will remove them. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in years. I had taken the final step. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a legal proceeding. When I got home, they were in the kitchen. I heard scraping. I walked in and found them trying to pry the pantry padlock off with one of my good screwdrivers. They froze like thieves caught in the act. What do you think you're doing? I asked, my voice deadly. We're hungry. Stephanie spat. You've locked up all the food. I expect you to be respectful, but I see that is impossible. Mom, we just want it. Ethan began. Get out of my kitchen now. Stephanie took a step toward me, her eyes burning with hatred. You are a cruel, wicked old woman. And you, I replied, are a shameless, disrespectful trespasser. She raised her hand. I didn't flinch. Go ahead, I whispered. Touch me. Give me one more reason to call the police. Ethan grabbed her arm. Stephanie. No. Let's just go. She ripped her arm away. This is your fault, she screamed at him. Then she stormed back to their room. Ethan stood there, the screwdriver in his hand. Go, Ethan, I said, my voice weary. The next time you try to break into something that isn't yours, I will call the police. I don't care that you are my son. He left. I put a chair under my doorknob. That night, I did not feel safe in my own home. 2 days later, Mr. Harrison called. The judge signed the order. An officer will be there this afternoon to serve it. I waited in my armchair. At 3:15 p.m. The doorbell rang. I opened it to a uniformed court officer. Mrs. Martha Ellington? Yes. I have a court order for a Mr. Ethan Vance and a Miss Stephanie Woods. Are they at this residence? Yes, they are. Please come in. I knocked on their door. Ethan, Stephanie, you have a visitor. They emerged looking confused. The officer was professional and brief. I am an officer of the court. I am here to serve you with this official eviction order. The color drained from Ethan's face. Stephanie snatched the paper from his hand. Eviction? This is illegal. She can't do this. We're family. Ma'am, the officer said patiently. Mrs. Ellington is the sole registered owner. You have no lease. The law is on her side. You have 48 hours from this moment to vacate the property with all your belongings. If you fail to comply, you will be forcibly removed by the sheriff's department. Stephanie turned on me. You did this. You're throwing us on the street. I did what I had to do to reclaim my peace, I said. You had your chance to leave with dignity. You chose this. Mom, Ethan's voice was broken. Mom, you can't. We have nowhere to go. You stopped treating me like family the day you let her scream at me. The day you violated my home. That is not my problem anymore. The officer left them with a copy of the order. The silence in the house was heavy, suffocating. We're not leaving, Stephanie hissed, crossing her arms. Then the police will drag you out, I replied. I'm sure the neighbors would enjoy the show. It makes no difference to me. You are a bitter, cruel woman, she wept, her voice cracking with performative rage. You're going to die here all alone. No one will be there to hold your hand. I would rather die alone in peace, I said, than live with company and be humiliated. You have 48 hours. I suggest you start packing. I went to my room and closed the door. The next 48 hours were a tense, silent war. They packed. I heard them dragging bags, slamming drawers. Ethan tried to talk to me one last time. Mom, please. I'll make her apologize. We can fix this. There is nothing to fix, Ethan. If you do this, he said, his eyes filling with tears, I will never forgive you. That is your choice, I said. I have made mine. On the final morning, I sat in the kitchen drinking my coffee. Nancy was with me. They made their final trips to their car. The house was filled with the sound of their defeat. At 11 a.m., Ethan walked out with the last box. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at me, his eyes red. He was waiting for me to break to call him back. I just sipped my coffee. Goodbye, Mom, he whispered. And he left. I heard the car door slam. I heard the engine start. I heard the sound fade down the street until it was gone. Nancy put her hand on mine. They're gone, Martha. They're gone. They're gone, I repeated. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. A profound, bone-deep relief. Let's clean, I said. We went to the guest room. They had left it destroyed. Trash on the floor, stains on the carpet, the sheets ripped. A final, pathetic act of spite. We cleaned. We scrubbed every surface. We washed the walls. We opened the windows, letting the fresh air chase out the last lingering scent of her perfume. By the time we were done, the sun was setting. The room was just a room again. That night, I took the padlocks off my doors. I made myself a simple dinner and ate at my kitchen table in the silence. It was no longer a threatening silence. It was a peaceful one. I sat on my patio watching the stars appear. I thought about my life, my sacrifices. I thought about the son I had raised and the man he had become. A few weeks later, my phone rang. An unknown number. Hello. A pause. Mom. I waited. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Ethan's voice was thick. I got a job. We're in a small apartment. I know I messed up. I know I was a coward. I listened. I didn't absolve him. I'm glad you're working, Ethan, I said. Do you think you can ever forgive me? I thought for a long time. I don't know, son. I truly don't. I understand, he said, his voice small. Take care, Mom. You too, Ethan. I hung up. The tears I had refused to shed finally came, not for him but for me. For the 74-year-old woman who had finally learned to put herself first. My house is my sanctuary again. It is quiet. It is mine. I learned a hard lesson, one that took me a lifetime to understand. Respect is not something you are given. It is something you demand. Dignity is not something you plead for. It is something you reclaim. I did not lose my son that day. I merely walked away from someone who had forgotten how to be one. And that wasn't a loss. It was in the end my most silent and most profound victory.